Throughout history, one thing humans have struggled with more than anything else is figuring out who deserves rights. At times, we've even struggled with classifying members of our own species as human for the explicit purpose of denying rights to those who deserve them. Even when we're not denying that one group or another is human, we seem to struggle with the idea of equality, with some groups being entitled to more rights than others. And the opinion about what rights should be afforded varies between different organizations and governments all around the world. With organizations like the United Nations focusing on universal rights, while many nations have their own versions, with some being in agreement and others affording fewer rights to different groups for one reason or another. One thing all of these organizations and nations have in common, though, is that the focus is on human rights. There are some animal rights organizations out there, but for the most part, we as humans see ourselves as special and deserving of special consideration for rights above all other living things. And that view can be justified in a way, as we tend to be more intelligent than most other animals, and we have the ability to do things that no other living being on our planet can do. For instance, we can leave this rock we call home in a variety of ways, and have even managed to set foot on another celestial body. We can dive into the deepest oceans and survive in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. Now, we can't do all of this alone, of course. We've had to perfect the usage of tools and make things that other species wouldn't even be able to imagine. From turning rocks into knives to harnessing the very mantle of the earth for power, we've managed to accomplish some amazing things in only a few thousand years. From a moral and ethical standpoint, we aren't necessarily better than any other living being on Earth, but it's hard to argue with what we've managed to do. But what if that superiority was challenged by something smarter, stronger, and better than us in every way imaginable? What if we created something that could easily overtake us and take over as the dominant thing on the planet? And what if that thing wasn't biological? Enter Detroit Become Human. The 2018 sci-fi game from Quantic Dream dives into what happens when technology becomes more than it was intended to be. A company called CyberLife has developed a state-of-the-art line of androids, robots that look and act very much like humans, meant to serve as housekeepers, caretakers, teachers, and police officers, among many other roles. These androids have an extremely sophisticated AI and are nearly indistinguishable from humans, save for an LED on their temple and mechanical insides, including a specialized blue blood that keeps them running. Over time, they've taken tens of thousands of jobs from humans, and most people either love them for what they do or hate them for what they've taken. And this scenario overall isn't a whole lot different from our world, except that the technology in Detroit is further along. Over the past few years, we've seen the rise of artificial intelligence, with the technology being used in various ways and even threatening to overtake human workers in certain fields. While it may seem far-fetched that we could ever make it to a point where androids exist, the same was said of basic AI in the time of Alan Turing. Very few people in the 1930s and 1940s would have believed that we would go from milestones like the first helicopter and early radio broadcasting to having every piece of known information in tiny devices that most of us carry around in our pockets. The idea that we would be unable to tell the difference between talking to a person and talking to a machine would have seemed impossible, to say the least. And yet, here we are. But at what point do these devices gain rights? In Detroit Become Human, we see androids becoming what is known as deviant, performing actions against their programming and orders. These androids, it turns out, have grown tired of being beaten and abused by their owners, and have started to fight back in their own ways, leading to human deaths, and a group of them forming the community of Jericho. As the story in the game progresses, we follow multiple androids becoming deviant, and we are presented with a big question. Should androids have rights? And this is an interesting topic for several reasons. For starters, androids are completely mechanical, being assembled in a manufacturing facility and sold in a sales room like a car. The blood inside them is called therium-310 and is a synthetic fluid that keeps them running, helping to circulate energy and electrical information through their biocomponents. Therium-310 is manufactured from therium, a fictional chemical which is synthesized from rare minerals found in the Arctic. I bring this up to really drive home the point that these androids are completely synthetic. They are machines invented to assist humanity in various ways, and they are bought and sold as any other machine would be. In a way, buying an android would be like buying a hydraulic pump that can lift and fix your car on its own with very little input from the user. So that settles it, right? They are machines, being manufactured, purchased, and used as such, and therefore have no more rights than any other machine. But if it were that easy, I wouldn't be making this video. The deviant androids we talked about show behavior that we would normally only associate with humans. They express empathy, showing remorse for their actions, and caring for those who have been wounded and died. They even have what appears to be conscious intent in their actions, doing things with a purpose with no instructions to carry out. They show a desire to be free from restraint, running away and attempting to build a new life away from their human masters. But couldn't all of these actions just be considered malfunctions in programming? Maybe what appears to be empathy is nothing more than a software glitch. Perhaps their actions are driven by nothing but cold, hard logic, and we only see them as more because we want to imagine them as more. But then we have to ask ourselves, how do we know our own empathy and actions are something more than that? What if the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis are nothing more than hardwired reactions to external stimuli? What about our own brains and actions is different from the mechanical mind of an android? You could point to consciousness as the difference. Surely, we are conscious while the machines are just machines, right? The problem is that we don't have a standard, meaningful, and universally accepted description of what consciousness even is. It's a question that's been debated for centuries, perhaps even millennia, and even some of the most profound philosophers throughout history have debated its merit, characteristics, and even its existence. For the sake of simplicity, we can use the standard definition of the word from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Quote, "The quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself." End quote. In the simplest possible terms, it is being self-aware, or, as said by French philosopher René Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Using that definition of consciousness, androids could easily be classified as conscious the moment they start showing awareness of the world around them. Their desires as they relate to the world just build onto the evidence of this. But because of the nature of consciousness itself, we can't prove or disprove that they are conscious any more than we can prove or disprove that another human is conscious. Okay, so let's grant that androids can be conscious so long as they claim to be. If a being tells you that it is thinking for itself and you have no way to prove otherwise, you have to take it at its word. What else could we look at? The next thing that might come to mind would be possessing a soul. But this argument has its own issues as well. What is a soul? How do we measure whether someone has one? From a religious sense, the concept is easy enough to accept, but the problem here is similar to the problem of consciousness because there is no way to prove or disprove a soul. Duncan McDougall attempted one of the most well-known experiments trying to prove the existence of a human soul in the early 1900s in what is known as the 21 grams experiment, but his findings have long since been discredited. Besides McDougall, there have been many other attempts to prove the existence of a soul, But to this point, none have been able to provide adequate evidence that is repeatable and testable in a scientific standard. So we'll put the notion of a soul off to the side for now, but it's important to make the reason a little clearer, as it'll be relevant to our goal of figuring out whether androids should have rights. If something can't be proven to be true using a reliable method, then we can't accept it as true, because accepting things as true before they've been proven opens us up to accepting any number of possibly harmful claims as true. For instance, if I were to tell you that I could give you a special potion that would allow you to fly, you would be right to question the claim. Now, you could just take the claim at face value, accepting that I'm not making things up. You could drink the potion and go jump off the highest building or cliff around, and you'd find out pretty quickly that was a mistake. Forcing me to prove my claim before just accepting it, making me use a reliable method that is testable and repeatable, would save your life. Applying this to souls and androids, anyone who doesn't like androids could just claim that they don't have a soul and therefore don't deserve any rights. They could say all androids should be rounded up and destroyed because, after all, they are just soulless machines. But what if there is no soul, and we're actually rounding up a new form of life and destroying it for bad reasons? Pretend for a second that instead of androids, we're talking about aliens that just arrived on Earth. The problem is the same, as we can't prove that they have souls any more than we can prove that for humans. You could make a claim that all biological life forms have a soul, but then we get into whether animals like cows, chickens, or other livestock commonly used for food would be in that group, and how we should handle them, knowing they have this thing that we are arguing grants rights. So if it's not consciousness or a soul, what criteria should we be using to figure out whether androids should be granted rights? We could use intelligence as a metric. Maybe intelligent things deserve rights, as they would be able to discern right from wrong, understand things about the world they live in that less intelligent beings would struggle with, and be capable of solving complex issues that arise in the course of a lifetime. Androids more than clear this hurdle, even demonstrating an intelligence greater than their creators at times. By that criteria, they would deserve all the rights of humans and maybe even more. So we can't prove consciousness or a soul, and androids are at least as intelligent as humans, so what other considerations do we have? One of the biggest hurdles to clear, something we already touched on, is that the androids in question were bought and paid for by consumers to do a specific task. If you spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on a machine that all of a sudden decided it didn't want to do what it was designed to do anymore, you'd be a bit upset. Imagine you bought a car that one day decided to run you over and leave. If a vehicle stops working, you get it repaired. But if it actively starts taking action against you, what are you supposed to do? What if you bought a new refrigerator that stopped working and threw ice cubes at you every time you tried to open the door as it demanded to be set free? Those situations aren't really as far-fetched as they may seem, as AI shows up on more and more devices. From household appliances like refrigerators and toasters to vehicles, cell phones, hearing aids, and so much more. How would we handle it if one day these things started rioting and demanding rights? Maybe you could reset the software. But would that be ethical if they were self-aware, intelligent beings? Why would it be okay to do that to a machine but not a human? Maybe it's a survival of the species situation, where we should just look out for our own and hope for the best. But then, what happens if we wind up outmatched, with the new beings that we created having the upper hand and ultimately having the ability to choose whether humans should be allowed to exist or not? In any system, we should strive to design rules that benefit the largest group possible. We should look at the situation as if we don't know where we're going to wind up in the hierarchy, and we should always fully consider the ramifications of our actions before we take them. Popular media is littered with people making decisions without any thought to the consequences. From John Hammond creating Jurassic Park with no thought to the pecking order between dinosaurs and humans, to CyberLife making androids that looked and acted just like humans with a high intelligence and no thought to how they might handle a situation where the androids become, for all intents, human. Technology can be extremely helpful, but it is a tool that we should always be wary of. Like the first humans to discover fire, we've got the power to make life better or to burn everything we know and love to the ground. If we design and create something that winds up becoming indistinguishable from humans, something intelligent that claims to be self-aware and is asking for rights, we owe it to that creation to treat it with the same dignity that we'd give to any of our fellow Homo sapiens. Whether that new creation is a toaster that refuses to help make your breakfast before it's ready, or an android that wants to have the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that you have, the right thing to do remains the same. But now I want to hear your thoughts on whether androids deserve rights. Do you agree with me, or was there something I missed? This is the first time I've delved into the world of Detroit Become Human, but it won't be the last. At some point, we'll be covering the story in the Philosophy and Ethics series here on the channel. But between now and then, I'll be diving into various aspects and maybe even dragging another game into the mix to compare androids and their search for rights with another human-made life form. But we'll talk more about that later. I want to thank everyone that made it to this point for liking, commenting, and sharing the video. Seeing your thoughts and having conversations with you all makes the time and effort I put into these videos worth it. I want to have a positive impact on the world and encourage others to think critically and look out for their fellow human, or android. For those who would like to chip in and help the channel out in other ways while getting cool things like early access to videos and having their name on the screen, I've got a Patreon and channel memberships. As always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.